be a fairly straightforward meeting. So let me know when we start.
Okay,
Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Claims Committee of the Norwalk Common Council for today, Thursday, December 8th, 2022, beginning at 7:02 p.m. Starting with the roll call, Councilmember Jen McMurray. is
here,
Thank you. Councilmember Nora Najelski-Eichner is present, and Councilmember Greg Burnett. Unfortunately, we do not have a quorum at this time, but we can proceed with receiving information from the various departments. Moving on to item number 3, which is public participation. We did not receive any written correspondence as it relates to any public comments. Is there anyone that has dialed in that wishes to speak at this time?
there are no attendees.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'll close public participation and move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes of the Finance Committee meetings. Unfortunately, because we do not have a quorum, we will not approve the minutes at this time. We'll defer this table of the minutes until the January meeting, at which time we'll bring the minutes forward for approval and any corrections that may be necessary. So with that, we'll move on to items 5, 6, and 7, which is the Claims Committee report for November 2022, December of 2022. The narrative on the tax collections dated December 5th, 2022, and the monthly tax collectors report dated for October 2022 and November 2022. So over to you, Lisa B.
Thank you. Good evening. You did not have a meeting last month, and coincidentally, we had some difficulty closing out the month of October. So it worked out well that we didn't report in November. We did close the month of October in late November, and we were able to close the month of November in fairly early December. So you have 2 spreadsheets. I wrote the narrative to reflect, to catch us up to date, and I dated it December 5th to provide it to the Board of Estimate this past Monday, and I used November figures for it. So our current collections are actually on track. We are at 55.24% of our adjusted levy. Our prior year's collections took a bit of a hit due to credits that had to be taken out of our current collections. And you'll see that reflected in the difference between October and November end of month. But that is what it is. It's a result of court stipulated judgments. But as the CFO mentioned on Monday's meeting, the city does budget for that. We do take that into account, but nonetheless, as tax collector, I have to track it because I am comparing myself to the prior year. With regard to claims, I jumped ahead to the narrative because it works out you don't have a quorum. I don't have any special requests that you need to do this evening, so that's all right. The claims are just for your informational purposes only. So you won't have to vote on anything. But the big news really for us right now, there's 2 things. Our collection agency is doing a mailing. As you may recall, you approved our use of an agency earlier this year. It was also forwarded on to the Common Council with the approval of the mayor, and we contracted with them. This doesn't cost the city anything. The costs are borne by the delinquent taxpayers who are subject to the collection enforcement. Their first mailing is going out tomorrow. I sent the stakeholders copies of what this mailing looks like. It's for past due motor vehicle taxes for which we do not have a valid address any longer. We suspend our billing on those accounts. It's been a number of years since one of these mailings by a collection agency on our behalf was issued. We did use a collection agency in the past. They went out of business and we issued a request for proposals. We solicited bids and we went with a new company. So that first mailing is going out tomorrow. It should generate some collection activity. It should also generate a significant number of questions as people are contacted by the agency. So I wanted you to be aware of that. That is happening now. The primary offices that are going to be affected are our division and the assessor's division. The other issue is normally at this time, I'm telling you that our bills are at the printer for our second installment billing. They're not at the printer yet because of some of these issues that we had with our software upgrade. We're working on it, but they're probably going to go out a little bit later than we would have liked. I should know more by the end of next week, but I'm optimistic after some robust activity this week to resolve some problems. I would think by the beginning to middle of next week, I should have a file to the printer. And I'm hoping that they will go out, if not before the holiday, the Christmas holiday, definitely by the end of the month, but possibly before the Christmas holiday. So I'm sorry I don't have better news to report on that end, but we've had some issues with our software that we're sort of struggling through. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions you may have about that, but I gave you quite a bit of detail in the narrative as well.
One question, Lisa, will that affect the due date at all, or we will maintain the due date for the end of January 2023?
Well, here's how it works. Taxes by law are due January 1st, payable by February 1st. We've already issued bills for that billing back in June. We also in Norwalk, unlike many other towns, also send a second installment billing that's just a follow-up to what we already billed in July. So technically, taxpayers already have a bill in their hand, but our Norwalk taxpayers are accustomed to getting a second installment bill because we allow them to pay at banks and things like that, that some other towns don't do. But I have every confidence that we will have bills out prior to January 1st. We like to bill early. We like to bill early December 10th, December 12th. That's a bit unusual. That's my schedule that I go by. But by law, we're just supposed to have the bill out by the end of the month. I'm sure we will. It's inconvenient for our taxpayers. It's disturbing for me that they don't have their bills already. But they can, there's already people every day, dozens of people who are coming in to pay their bill. They can pay online already. They can send a check. It's perfectly fine. We're able to take their payment. But to put that other piece of paper in their hand, we do have a demographic that likes that. And those are the ones that I'm stressing out about right now. But they'll definitely be out by the end of the month. I can assure you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did any other council members have any questions? And also, please let the minutes reflect that Council Member Diana Revolus joined at 7:04 p.m. Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you for the update, and we'll look forward to any communication we receive and I'm sure you'll share with us when the bills are in the mail. So we'll look for that email communication.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to item 8, which is receive Oak Hills Authority monthly financial statement for September 2022 and October 2022. And we have the Chair of the board, Joe Andresco, to provide the update.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Beautiful. I apologize if there's some background noise that may pop up every once in a while. So I'm not going to touch on September because October obviously includes September. But the position is continues to be fairly strong. We're running pretty well on golf rounds, a little bit over budget, not egregiously over budget, in the first 4 months of the fiscal year. And October really brings us into the period where we don't do as much business because of weather. We do some business, but not as much. But rounds are up, cart rentals are up, discount ID cards for the season are up a little bit. So that's all going very well, and kind of puts us into, as I mentioned, the winter season, where we focus a little bit more on contract work, some capital improvements, and kind of planning for what the next season is going to look like. Operating income was about 160,000 over budget, and our cash position is pretty good, which is going to help fund some of those capital improvement expenditures. It's going to go down as we're not getting revenue and adding to it, and we have some personnel expenses and the capital improvement expenses, and obviously just regular maintenance expenses. But 628 is a very strong position for this business. It's due to revenue, but it's also due to a little bit lower expenses. Some of that is due to difficulty finding staff. So if we're not staffing, we're not paying people. But overall, it does net out to lower expenses. And in the first 4 months, we've made a total of 55,000 in payments back to the city under our repayment plan. We have also finished our audit, which has been provided to the city, and along with that, a 1% payment of our gross revenue, and we provided that, I think, in November. So we're kind of continuing to find strong rounds, strong usage, and being able to leverage that into revenue while managing expenses. So it's a good news story through October. We go into a quiet period where there's not as much happening. So we'll start cooking again March and April. If it's a nice March, we'll get more business, but likely more likely in April.
Thank you, Joe, for that update. You mentioned the audit report. When will this committee receive a copy of that audit report?
I could send it tonight if you'd like.
That would be appreciated.
Okay, I know we've sent it to, I guess, Henry's office. I don't know if what the distribution approach should be, but we can send it. We'll send it immediately.
Great, thank you. One of the items that has been somewhat publicized is the situation with the restaurant at Oak Hills. I don't know if you have an update on what is transpiring there.
I certainly don't have anything to add to the story that was published. I'll just note that it's an ongoing contract negotiation.
So does any member of the committee have any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, just very briefly, and I apologize if I'm missing it in the in your notes. Does the 55,000 include the 1% payment, if not, what was the 1% payment on the debt?
This is a good question. I can dig around in an email, and if I find it quickly, I can let you know. But I believe it is around somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000, and I don't actually remember if it was included in that. But I can follow up to let you know.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. We'll look forward to receiving the audit report so that the members of the committee can review that. And if we have any questions, we can address it during the January meeting. And it appears that the park is in good financial position despite the situation with the restaurant, which is promising. And at the appropriate time, we'll accept any update as it relates to that situation. So, great. All right, thank you, Joe. And,
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Moving on in the agenda to item 9, which is a report of the tax assessor's office. And we have our tax assessor, Bill Ford, on to provide an update. Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, everyone. Chairman. So a lot going on in the assessor's office right now. Last time we were here, we were seeking approval of the contract, authority to sign the contracts for the revaluation. Those contracts have been signed. We've had a couple of planning meetings. I thought I would be able to bring forth a press release at this time. I'm actually going to ask to come back next month because a number of things have happened in the last 2 days, including we have gone back and forth on the press release with the consultants. The state, basically I received notice yesterday, the state updated the senior citizen elderly homeowner dollar amounts. So we just received that notice yesterday. So if I come back next month, we can actually provide those numbers, including the adjustments for the city, for our local adjustments. So we have that revaluation. As Lisa said, we have a number of computer upgrades going on. We are still moving ahead with those, dealing with any issues that arise. And we've continued to move ahead. This has been a very, I'll call it fruitful week with one of the computer programs, things that have been lagging for a few weeks. We seem to have made some progress this week, which is good. The DMV had an issue due to our computer issues. We actually are a little lucky in that the DMV had an issue and forgot to, for the city of Norwalk, they missed 500 vehicles on our supplemental billing that they provided to us. But due to our delays, we were able to add that to our processing for the supplemental billing. The supplemental billing, we have approximately 50 that will have to be hand valued. The others have been valued and we're ready to head. We hopefully will be ready to move ahead tomorrow with that supplemental billing. We are moving ahead with the conversion to QDS as well. That is delayed until February. We had hoped to do it by the year end, but again, when you're working on projects that involve technology, it's better to move slowly and accurately than to have any issues. We will continue to move ahead with those. So what I'd like to do is come back next month and present some of the numbers that we can provide and a public notice for the revaluation.
Absolutely, that would be welcome. I'm sure everyone is anxious to get a further update as it stands for the reval in 2023.
I would just add that on the QDS conversion, we're looking at a February, March migration, but we've been meeting weekly with the QDS people. So we've had a 6-month period in which to make this transition. And that process working very well with enough time and everybody involved step by step. We expect that February, March timeline to be hit. So it doesn't mean we're not working on it right now.
Great. Yes, Council Member Nora Nadelski-Eichner.
Just very quickly, Mr. Ford, when you bring back to us next month about the reevaluation, so I hear a press release. Is there sort of a broader communications plan? You know, is it press release only? How do we get the information out to folks about what to expect?
So in addition to the press release, at various times during the project, we do mailings. We advise people of their new values. We put out notices of people. So through our communication system, we're going to be letting people know when the inspectors are out in the field. We'll send regular updates as to people are in the field inspecting properties, be aware of who's in your area. When we do that, we also provide the information of the individuals to our customer service department and our police department, so that when they get any phone calls of people in the area, they're aware and can advise as to who those people are in the event that they receive the phone calls besides our office.
Yeah, that is exactly part of what I was imagining. And will there be sort of social media kind of alerts as well?
I anticipate moving ahead, we will be having that, yes.
Okay, great. So I'll certainly, I'll do my best to make sure I'm passing along to my neighbors, but I'm anticipating hearing some concerns from folks. So thank you. I'm glad to hear that there'll be a comprehensive communications plan next month. Thank you.
Mr. Ford, are we planning on having any type of educational session, whether it's a town hall or a webinar? I think you mentioned webinar, so that Norwalk residents can get education about the upcoming reval.
What we usually like to do is that later in the project. And the reason for that is so that we have some data that we've been able to gather and analyze first. So prior to releasing the values to the citizens, the taxpayers, what we would do is have an information session. We can record it and put it up on various websites as needed. I have done situations like that in the past in previous areas where I've worked, starting revaluations. Fortunately, in Connecticut, the revaluations have been every 5 years. This is a full inspection revaluation, which are required every 10 years. So there are bodies in the field looking at all the properties. This isn't just a statistical analysis one.
So the education session is part of the project plan at some point. Good, great.
Yes, sir.
I would also mention that when we conducted these RFPs, in addition to technical excellence and making sure they had sufficient staffing to get the job done, the communication program that each proposed was a very important factor in how we selected firms. Communication starting up front, whether it's to the citizens or to elected officials, whether it's these seminars, and that was one of the very important factors in selecting the winners of the RFP.
Great. Are there any additional questions or comments for the tax assessor?
I'll see you next month then.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. That moves us on to item 10 in the agenda, which is the Chief Financial Officer Operating Capital Budget discussion. So we have Mr. Dakowitz with us to give us an update on the budget activity.
Thank you, Sharon. Starting in October, we sent out budget packages to all the departments for the operating budget. It's what we call the pro forma. And with the pro forma, we send out numbers based on the budget department review. So we start with the current payroll and the vacancies that we are aware of. And we add the 2.35% annual increase. We add the increases for steps. So therefore, we get the payroll numbers pretty close to where they're going to be. We look at the other line items. We tend to look at a couple of years of actual past history. We look at the current year's approved budget, and we determine what we feel is an appropriate number for each of these line items. The context is that the mayor has requested or proposed a 3.5% maximum increase by department. When we work with some of the chiefs, let's say the head of economic development, who might have 7 or 8 different departments under her, she may determine that 1 or 2 departments should be over 3.5% because they require investments, but others will be lower. So we try to get that target 3.5% for everything that's under her supervision. So we send out those pro formas. The pro formas went out, as I said, late October. A week later, the first week in November, we sent out the packages of information regarding the capital budget. Basically, here are the forms to fill out. Here's how you navigate the website for input. And a very important aspect there is to put them in priority order. We have started interviews with each of the departments. So the departments took that information. I think we give them about 4 or 5 weeks. They input their data into the system. The budget department has 1 or 2 weeks to review and prepare. And then we start off with meetings with each and every department where we review whatever the projected revenues are, whatever the projected expenses are, and we have a discussion. If they come in at our pro forma, there's not much to debate or discuss. When it doesn't, we try to understand, why do you need more money? What is it for? There's an investment. There are times when they have told us that they have reviewed this with the mayor and chief of staff who've endorsed those investments. So after we meet with all the departments, we take all this information, analyze it again, and then we sit with the mayor and chief of staff and say, where should we come out on this? And the end of that process is what's called the mayor and CFO recommended operating budget. And that kicks off the system. As most of you are very well aware, the council then sets a cap and a ceiling, and it goes to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, which has hearings with each department. I believe they also hold a public hearing. I know the Finance Committee also holds a public hearing along the way. And in the end, the Board of Estimate and Taxation can shift the numbers from department to department, line item to line item, but they are expected to come in under the cap. If they choose not to and recommend a higher budget, it goes back to the council, and the council must approve that, I believe, with a 2/3 vote, supermajority. Otherwise, the council signs off, and it comes back to the BET for the final approval to set the tax rates, and the budget is codified. On the capital side, a little bit different. I get the requests for the capital projects, and then I come out alone, CFO recommended capital budget. It goes to Planning and Zoning Commission with obviously support and help from the Planning and Zoning Committee staff, and they end up coming out with a recommendation as well. That goes to the mayor. The mayor comes out with his recommended capital budget, and then the roles are reversed. The Board of Estimate and Taxation sets a ceiling on the capital budget, and it goes to the council to determine shifting numbers around. Projects can be added, projects can be changed. And at the end of the day, that develops into our capital projects, which ultimately leads to an authorization for me to borrow the money and issue bonds to finance those capital projects. So those are the two cycles. At the same time, based on numerous recommendations, city-side budgeting and Board of Ed budgeting have been meeting, has to be at least 4 or 5 times now. There have been requests to try to collaborate in advance. So I have expressed the guidelines that the mayor had mentioned, the 3.5% per department, and the Board of Ed has informed us of their priorities and programs. They've talked about, I forget the exact term, something like a maintenance budget where there are going to be no new programs. They just want to finance the programs that are already there. I would just say that the strategy that the mayor and I developed was that let's assume that the departments come in at 3.5%. There are some less controllable expenses that are going to be higher. Most notably, health insurance, pension and OPEB contributions, and debt service. Debt service, we keep adding debt, and the rates that we are getting charged have gone up. So therefore, the debt service portion of the operating budget, I expect is going to come in higher than the 3.5%. And we have discussed using either ARPA funds if they're available or drawdowns from the rainy day fund to help offset those increases, which we must pay, but would allow us to mitigate the rise in the actual mill rates and tax bills for the citizens. So that's our strategy. Keep it tight by department. We have some less controllable, and then use, let's say, the rainy day fund to try to moderate the increase. So we've exchanged these ideas several times. I think it's been helpful. Sharon Burnett has been participating. We've had members of the Board of Education, as well as the superintendent and the mayor. And that's been a healthy discussion. We expect a very tough economic environment. We're not sure what's going to happen for our taxpayers. I keep seeing more and more economists and business executives who claim they are planning for a recession next year. So we're trying to buffer our taxpayers by keeping our costs lower. So that's our plan. Any questions?
I don't, do we have any questions from any of the council members? I did want to remind everyone that our next joint meeting, public meeting with the Board of Education will be Thursday, January 12th. So we will have another joint meeting with the Board of Education on Thursday, January 12th.
Right, I would just comment on that. One
Yes.
of the challenges for us, I mean, the budget department sets the calendars for the city side. The challenge with the schools is that they develop their numbers and then they have to have meetings with the Board of Education that ratify their budgets before they even submit it to us. So they tend to be last in the process, and they tend to do it around the middle of January. So that's when we're able to build those numbers into the whole process because of the deliberations and communications they have to have.
Yes, Councilmember Jen McMurray.
Do we anticipate that we will have more concrete numbers in terms of the Board of Ed requests when we next meet, or we still don't know what the timeline is of that?
I would say that the Board of Ed's discussions, and Chairman Burnett, please chime in. You were at all these meetings. They've tended to focus on strategic priorities and what they want to spend their money on. They gave some very, very preliminary percentage increases for certain line items. So I don't have any numbers right now, and I would wait until Linda and the superintendent firm up the numbers and then share them with us.
Sure, thank you.
I will say that will be a request that we will bring forward, that before the next joint meeting, if we can get, they may not be finalized, but at least a range as it relates to the numbers.
And I would assume, just in addition to that, I think a range would be great. I would assume in addition to that, any of the questions we asked in the joint meeting last time, they would bring answers to, correct?
We will bring that forward as a request also.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Nora Dudelsky-Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. So on the capital budget side, Mr. Jackowitz, I know that you had made a request, I don't know, sometime earlier this year, we had discussed you're sort of seeking to find out if there are things that have been on the capital budget and unfunded and have sort of dropped in priority, or like some things has sometimes happen in life. When you don't do it long enough, it then is no longer necessary. So have we made any progress in whittling down the existing capital appropriations?
Well, first, let me clarify. Last year, the amount of approved capital projects, net of expected reimbursements that were not funded or bonded, was about $225 million. The most recent number is 175 million. Last year's capital budget was about 39 million, and we ended up borrowing 82 million, and with premiums, it was 90 million of cash. Also, out of that 39 million, only about 1/3 was going to be spent in fiscal 23. So in essence, we borrowed in excess of what was necessary just for the year, and we used those additional proceeds to start paying down that backlog.
Mhm.
So let's say that right now we're looking at about 175. I don't know that currently anyone is focusing on those projects and saying, should we slim them down? Should we push them back? Should we cancel them? I don't know if anybody is focused on that. So the 175 is out there. I look at it as part of our responsibilities eventually to fund them. And as I've mentioned several times in the past, the size of our borrowing is usually dependent on the cash flow projections. I want to make sure we have sufficient cash to satisfy the construction and purchase schedules of the department heads and chiefs, but at the same time, not to have excess proceeds, which runs us into trouble with the IRS regulation.
Absolutely. But I was just, I know that we, now that we have a 25-year plan for the schools, and, I certainly hope, and I'm supportive of getting a similar 25-year plan for the remainder of the city facilities. I know that we are going to step up, closer and closer to the debt limit that I know has you concerned. We've obviously had this conversation many times. And so, I certainly do recognize the value in doing a look back at the, existing appropriations that have not been spent and deciding, whether there's anything there that can be deprioritized. I know that I thought it was an excellent idea you had raised before. And so I'm just flagging it again as something that this season might be a time to look into, because again, we're all, I think, very aware that there's going to be real necessary maintenance investments in the city over the next couple of decades.
No, I appreciate that endorsement and support. I would just add, the biggest issue we're facing now, I've spent time with Alan Lowe, who is our construction and capital project guru, especially with buildings, and Jim Giuliano, our consultant, that with these delays, and especially with inflation, the numbers that we're working with are going to have to change. So if we saw a project that was $50 million, today it might be 55 to 60 million, just because all the elements of cost have gone up. I'm not sure that the reimbursement amount that the state agrees to also inflates. Sometimes it's a percentage of what the costs are. However, they audit the projects when they're completed, maybe 2 years after. It could be up to 5 years after. And we are subject to their evaluation where they say, we're not reimbursing you for this expense. So for example, what's well known is with the Norwalk High School, where they will not reimburse us for a swimming pool if it's decided to construct that. But sometimes what happens is, whether it was the historical 22% or the upcoming 80%, if certain things are not included and agreed upon to be reimbursed, the 80% becomes 74%, or the 22 becomes 18%. So that's an issue. So the gross cost of the construction projects may go up. The reimbursement is always a question of how much we're going to get. The third issue is that the state withholds 11% for retainage. Well known in the construction industry, we're not going to pay all your bills now. We wait until the end when we audit and check what you've done, and then we'll release the retainage. Well, when you're building a $200 million high school, that 11% retainage is money that we're going to have to lay out that we don't get. Normally with a construction project, the state is pretty good. We'll submit copies of invoices paid and they'll pay us back within 2 months. But it's deducting the 11%. 11% of a $200 million building is 22 million bucks. And there may be a need for us to borrow just to finance the working capital of these projects. So the gross cost is going up. I don't know where the reimbursements, whether that's going to match the increases. And on some of the larger projects, we may need to borrow to finance the cash flow. So those are just, clouds on the horizon. When you start talking 25-year plan, I mean, anything beyond 5 years is just, speculation. It's out there. It's a placeholder. The numbers can be anywhere. So I'm focused on making sure the current capital projects are financed, as well as the old projects that were approved that they want to build or spend this coming year. But you got to keep an eye toward the future.
Great. Any additional questions for Mr. Dakowitz? Okay. Thank you, Henry. We'll keep this as a standard update as we go through the budget cycle over the next few months. So the committee can stay up to date as to how we're progressing through the budget activities. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, with that, we're up to item 11, which is motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Oh, there it goes. There she goes.
I didn't know if she was
Good.
on or not. I
Wow.
apologize for stepping on your toes.
Wow,
Nah.
thank you, Diana. Okay, all those in favor, motion to adjourn by Diana Revelous. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Have a great rest of your evening. And thanks for your input and participation.
Greg, does it count if there's no quorum?
It is a meeting. However,
Listen,
we could
Listen.
not approve any items, so without a quorum. So we did
Henry?
have a meeting.
Henry,
I
we
w-
can stay here all night if you want.
Henry,
Yeah.
Henry, I was
Henry?
quiet because I've agreed with everything you have said from a while. So that's why I didn't say anything. But if you step on my motion to adjourn,
Never. Highest priority.
We stand adjourned. Have a great
Happy
evening.
holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Have a
Yes.
good one.
Happy holidays all. Thank you.
Yes,
Happy
thank you.
holidays to everyone. Take care.
you too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.